Hi, my name is Rupa. Engine assembling involves cleaning the components and proper lubrication, replacing worn out or broken components. Engine block components mean the assembling of crankshaft and flywheel. Piston and connecting rod assembly are involved. Now I am going to demonstrate the assembling of engine block components. At the end of this demonstration, you will be able to assemble crankshaft and flywheel, assemble piston and connecting rod assembly.
Tools, equipment and materials required. Spanner set, torque wrench, pry bar, piston ring compressor, gasket for oil pan, soft cloth, oil can, engine oil, engine stand. Before assembling the engine block components, refer to the service manual for instructions. Have all the tightening specifications handy. Be sure all the parts are thoroughly cleaned. Obtain replacement parts. The following kits are needed during reassembling: an overhaul kit, a timing chain kit, a cylinder head kit.
Before replacing the new parts, compare it with old part for proper size. Gather the tools needed to perform the following task. Refer to the tools and materials list for this project. Before starting the engine assembly, look up the following task specification in the shop manual. Record the information in the appropriate space.
Install the crankshaft. Install the upper halves of the main bearings in the engine block. Be sure to check for dirt or metal particles between the back of the bearing caps and the block before installation. Heavily lubricate the bearing faces. Do not lubricate the back of the bearings. Carefully install the crankshaft into the engine block. Install bearing inserts into the main bearing caps. Then, install the main bearing caps, being sure to install them according to the marks made during removal. Check the main bearing clearance with plastic gauge using the following method. Thoroughly dry the cap bearing insert. Lay a strip of plastic gauge across the bearing. Install and torque the main cap to specifications. Do not turn the engine. Remove the cap and compare the flattened plastic gauge to the scale provided. Install and tighten the main bearing cap fasteners to the proper torque. Ensure that the crankshaft turns easily with the main bearing caps properly torqued. Check the crankshaft end play using a dial indicator. Install the dial indicator on one end of the crankshaft. The dial indicator plunger should be parallel to the crankshaft. Push the crankshaft forward. Zero the dial indicator. Push the crankshaft backward. If necessary, install an oversize or undersized thrust bearing as follows. Add or subtract the dial indicator reading from the specified end play. Select the correct oversize or undersize to bring the end play to the proper specification. Replace the original bearing with a replacement bearing and recheck the end play. Install piston. Decide which piston to install first and heavily oil the piston, pin and rings. Place the ring compressor around the piston, ensuring that the ring compressor is facing the proper direction. Tighten the ring compressor around the piston rings. Remove the rod cap and install the bearing insert in the rod. Oil the exposed surface of the bearing. Install the piston by placing the piston and rod assembly into the cylinder and gently tapping the piston into the cylinder with a hammer handle. Be sure that the rod studs slip over the crankshaft journal. Place the connecting rod cap over the rod studs, being sure that it faces in the proper direction. Check the connecting rod bearing clearance with plastic gauge using the following method. Thoroughly dry the cap bearing insert. Lay a strip of plastic gauge across the bearing. Install and torque the rod cap to specifications. Do not turn the engine. Remove the cap and compare the readings. Flatten plastic gauge to the scale provided. If no, oversize or undersized bearings must be installed. Add or subtract the plastic gauge reading from the desired clearance. Select the correct bearing inserts to bring the clearance to the proper specifications. Replace the original rod and cap with the replacement inserts and recheck the clearance. Remove the connecting rod cap. Remove the plastic gauge. Oil the exposed surface of the rod cap bearing insert. Place the connecting rod cap over the rod studs, being sure that it faces in the proper direction. Install and tighten the rod nuts to the proper torque. Install the oil pump and oil pan. Rotate the engine block until the bottom of the engine faces up. Place the oil pump in position on the engine block and install and tighten the oil pump bowls. Pre-lubricate the bearings by following the directions provided by the manufacturer of the pre-lubrication equipment. Scrap the oil pan and block matting surfaces to remove old gasket material. Place the oil pan gaskets and seals on the engine block. Use the proper type of sealer if required. Place the oil pan on the block. Install and tighten the oil pan fasteners. Use the correct sequence and tighten the fasteners to the proper torque.
Now, let's have a recap of what we have learned in this topic. We have learned to assemble the crankshaft and flywheel, assemble the piston and connecting rod assembly. Assembling engine parts involve refitting of the crankshaft, piston and connecting rod assembly. Please remember that while crankshaft bolts are connecting rod bolts, you should confirm the torque values and tighten the bolts with a torque wrench. Similarly, use the special tools to fix piston and connecting rod assembly. Thus, we have learned the assembling of engine block components. Hope you have clarity on this. Practice this exercise with the help of your instructor.